you hear me? Good. Good to see everybody. Let me see. I love looking at all your faces. Jeannie, did you get your hair cut? It looks terrific. Really looks great. No, not that Jeannie. The other Jeannie. I love it. It really looks good. It really looks good. Yeah, I like it. How's everybody doing today? We're good? Look at you all muted. Well, it's good to see everybody again. So we're here once again with some really cool and exciting guides to give us an indication of what they're up to, what they were thinking when they wrote the channel, the answers through me, and what they have planned, what's coming up. And first, I just want to let you know that for those of you who were with me on Monday, you know, but we're starting a new class in September, and it's going to be about shifting all different kind of relationships that you have, from your relationships with parents and kids, friends, coworkers, anyone, even acquaintances. And that will be starting in September, and we're calling it Relationship. So I look forward to seeing you then. It's an intensive class. We'll have breakaway sessions with different components that'll be focusing on either parenting, romance, or others. And others would include your parents, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers, neighbors, everyone in general, just your relationships with all other people, okay? So look up there's a lot of dates. It's intensive, like I said. There'll be homework, there'll be breakaway groups. So online are all the dates on my website, so take a look at that, and I look forward to seeing you. Since we're not quite sure when we're going to be physically together yet, I'm making sure that I keep the momentum moving with things that we can do together online. And this is a good kickoff. And even after we're together again, we'll be doing more in the winter and more in the spring even. So those of you who haven't been local for all these years, you get to join us. I know we've just had somebody moved to North Carolina, another person moved to California, another one moved to Colorado, another one moved to Long Island from Colorado. So it gives us a chance to stay connected and to delve in and to get information from guides as it's unfolding, what their perspectives are. I don't have the chat room visible, so let me just make sure I have that. Okay, now I can see it. And feel free to type in any questions that you have throughout the night, particularly related to the things that we had talked about last time. What we were asking you to do from last time as like a homework assignment was to look at the provocative happenings around you and to see how you can use the set of questions that they gave you and kind of make a choice about whether it was something that you wanted to focus on further in your life, if it was something that you wanted to discard, to take some of that provocative, like scintillating energy out of it so you can make a determination of where it falls in your journey, okay? Did anybody have any like interesting things that they would like to report that they discovered? We can look at you and unmute you if you would like to share. Anybody have any cool things that they noticed that they kind of got almost sucked into it and then they stopped and they looked at those questions and said, let me think this through. How can I relate to this? Anyone at all have anything that they wanted to share? I know I had a couple of people send things in, but not that many. I actually had more people that were sharing live, like when I was speaking with them, they would say this is something that happened exactly after we spoke, and how it helped to up the decision-making part of our response. So instead of just being reactive, it gave tools to say, how will I process this in the future? One of the interesting things that we will always notice is that when we are making a shift, or we've made a shift, or we've brought good information in and we're living it and we know it, there's still this process that happens when we know it and then we unknow it, and then we know it and then we unknow it, and then we know it and then we unknow it. And it's like, how can that possibly happen? Like, you can even talk to yourself and say, I know better than this. And yet you find yourself getting caught up in it all over again. So you can, on one hand, say, I know better than this. And then on the other hand, you can go into, that rabbit hole and be caught up in the whirlwind of things that happen around you. Part of what the answers put forth for us is to give us a guidance system that was more at our fingertips, a way to discern information of what's happening, the narrative of all people's experiences and why we come together, anything from weather to violence, to religion, to unusual activities or unusual world events like we're experiencing now. It's to give you a framework for being able to say, does this make sense? Is this helpful to me? Is this something that I want to be a part of? How can I think independently of this? For a lot of years, I had been saying from the guides that the link between, for example, DNA and our propensity toward realizing a family illness, that I've been saying for a really long time that this is the kind of thing that we create. We create the link. So what happens is, I'll play this out for you. So if someone if a great grandmother had something and I saw her ill, and then, then my grandmother spoke about it a lot, and then my mother kind of reiterated that conversation. And then they started to say things like, oh, well, she was, 47 when that happened, or this is what happened when she was 62, or this is what happened to two of them when she was 81, when they were 81. What happens is we start to form assumptions that there's a link between our family history and what we witnessed. But what's creating the link is our belief system. What's creating the link is what we think. We know this formula inside, outside, and backwards. What we think, feel, believe, and then the subsequent actions that we take based on what we think and feel and believe. So the link from a scientific perspective, from a physiological perspective, didn't exist until we created it. Then, as more people begin to say, oh, well, her father, he died of a heart attack at this age, or he developed that, or he developed this, what started to happen is enough people got on board with those thoughts, and enough people believed them and shared them and fretted about them, that our physiological composition shifted to match what it is we were projecting. When you get enough people on board with a singular thought, then it shifts our reality fundamentally. And the reason I'm bringing this up as an example, well, I'm not really bringing it up, your guides are bringing it up, our guides are bringing it up, is because science, there has been some new evidence, and I don't know how prominently it's appearing yet, but little hints of stories that say there is no DNA connection that links us to our family history's disease, but that we create it through consciousness. So it's kind of interesting that if we were to flash forward, who knows, maybe 20 years or 200 years or 1,000 years, we would look back on civilization from 2020 and think, that's just so interesting. How could they possibly believe that? Oh, look at all the chaos it created. Look at all the body disharmony that it created. Look how many people died because of that belief that they manifested globally and passed on from generation to generation. So what the all of the guides that helped to channel the book, The Answers, what they're recognizing is that in this 15-year gap between when I wrote that book and today, with the shifts that are happening on the planet so dramatically and rapidly, they have seen that the groundwork has been laid for us to be able to take in and live to truth more than we ever did before. So 15 years we've been seeing changes. Everyone here has had some type of shift for themselves individually. They have grown or expanded or become aware. They've become more enlightened. They've become more able to deflect negative information or negative conversation around them. And as we're looking at where we were even in 2005 compared to where we are today, we can see so many advances that we made on the entire planet. And now we're really at an edge. This 2020, metaphoric for clear vision, it is an edge. And as we approach that edge, what they're wanting us to do in these classes is to recognize that what we do after that edge is going to be up to us. We're going to be the deciders. Right now, we're being brought into one of the most compelling worldwide events. And the reason it's so worldwide, where very few people are not touched by it, is because other opportunities for discovery of the concreteness of how we project reality that guides have been kind of playing around with and experimenting over the last, let's say 1,000 years, but let's really say the last 15 years, they haven't been able to captivate and absorb a great enough percentage of the population in a unified theme to be able to affect our projection of consciousness. So I'll give you an example. So there's a lot of science behind the concept of global warming. And there's a lot of science and research to support the idea that if we were to decrease our dependence on fossil fuels and really reduce our carbon imprint, then we would be able to stave off the results of the continuance of global warming and also to reverse it. So even though there's a lot of science and there's a lot of support for that concept, there's a whole nother school of thought that says it's completely not true, that it's all being made up, that it's fiction, and that we don't have to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and that there is no such thing as global warming. Now, here's the interesting thing is, as I just said about DNA and the link, we create the thing that we have drama about. So is global warming inevitable? No. But as soon as we begin to see it and research it and study it and put angst to it and look at it more and look at it more and look at it more, then it starts to grow because what we focus on expands. Now, since at some point it becomes concrete, it becomes founded exactly the way I described the DNA link can happen as we are repeating over and over again that we believe that there's a link between our history's medical conditions, our family history's medical tree and ours. So we have stepped into physiological changes because of that belief system. So then we did the same thing with global warming. Okay, so we make everything here. That's the thing that we have to understand, is that we make everything. So now we have kind of proven that this warming of the earth is creating all this thing, which inevitably creates weather patterns that are uncommon and not predictable from past historical evidence of the different weather happenings and how things come together to create a storm or a tsunami or a heat wave or a flood or a drought. So we're seeing these anomalies happen all over in a really massive way. So since the concept of moving away from using fossil fuels hasn't united people, the universe is continuing with their narrative by helping us to continue to unite, by actually demonstrating, well, at this point, these big happenings that we would have perceived as being anomalous, it's almost more common now to have an anomalous event than it is to have a predictable event, which means, therefore, that a shift has happened globally, worldwide. So now they're dancing with all of this evidence to once again try to get everybody onto a same singular thought, to unify in a process, to unify in a project, to unify in a belief, in the commonality of protecting something that's so precious, which is our globe that we will borrow temporarily and then pass on to our children and our grandchildren and so on, to all of our future generations. So now we've got this big event that seems to be supported by evidence that, in fact, the reduction of fossil fuel use will reduce this and transform our globe into a reharmonized state and protect, future generations and the polar ice cap and so on. Even with that, the globe is divided. Like, how can you be divided on something that seems so apparent? Like, well, why not just use fewer fossil fuels? So now, as the universe and all of these guides, and certainly the guides that channel the answers through us, these tons and tons of high vibrational energy souls, they're helping to say, well, in the experiment of unifying people, that one didn't have the result that we had necessarily hoped for. It's given, we're not going to abandon it, it's given a lot of people unity or cause for dedicating their lives and their passion and their interests to creating a remedy and reharmonizing our participation on the planet. So it's not like it's going to be abandoned or scrapped, but as we're leading up to these events that keep getting larger and larger and larger with the attempt to unify and bring in more people, this one's that we're experiencing now is it's hitting with us with a wallop, right? There's very few places on the planet that are not connected to shutdown or social distancing or the effects that it's having on family and economy and businesses and so on. There's very few places where they're not understanding the effects or experiencing the effects. So with this, what we're being given is a huge opportunity. And the opportunity is to choose. And throughout the whole period, I know we've been talking about, like, what do we want to take with us? But it's also, what do we want to do with our imaginations? Okay? So today, what we're going to talk about from our guides, and the guides from the answers, is we're going to talk about our imagination. I don't know offhand if we were to kind of glance through the key word of imagination in the answers book. I don't know that they specifically said it that much, but they did talk about focus a lot, and they did talk about how we manifest reality. But when you think about it in terms of imagination, it adds in my opinion, something that's a little bit more playful and a little bit more powerful than just what are you focusing on. What you focus on expands, okay? Fundamentally, I got to grab my answers book, but I'm listening to one particular guide here for a second. Let me find my answers book. I forgot to take it out. Nothing to see here. Nothing behind the curtain. Oop, that's not the one I wanted. Oh, there it is. I'll get it. I got it. All right, there we go. I got it. Here it is. Okay, we're good. Yeah. Should have done that, but I didn't. So here it is. Okay, so so what they're focusing on today, and it actually happens to be Alexander Graham Bell that I'm communicating with, which is kind of interesting because I never know who we're going to be communicating with. And he's showing me some interesting things. He, I guess, and I'm not all that aware, but I guess there might have been some controversy about the invention and who should be credited for the development or the invention of the telephone. And honestly, if that's true, I'm not really aware of it, that there was any kind of controversy, but apparently there was some, like who got there first or who should get the full credit for it and so on. But he's using that as an example that posthumously we can still stir up our version of something that had been long past, and we can still try to find what we consider to be the truth. We can still have opinions. We can still get disappointed or angry. We can still get riled up by something that doesn't really have a heck of a lot of relevancy on our life today, right? I mean, honestly, in moving forward from this day forward, does it matter if we properly credited exactly the right person who was the only inventor of the telephone? It's not relevant in our lives at all. Yet we can put energy into that. We can try to look for evidence. We can have historians and scholars look into more evidence and try to support or deny or detract from the story or whatever. But what we know here is that it wasn't Alexander Graham Bell that invented the telephone, because there were so many imaginative minds before he lived that led to all of the possibilities that existed for him to take whatever existed, from physical components that went into the telephone to wiring to the formation of the earpiece, from any component that went into the telephone, or from sciences that discuss physics or energy or waves or the ways that wires can carry energy. So there was so many people, when you think about it, that really invented the telephone, right? He might have been the last one to say, oh, what was it that I don't know if it's a fable or not, but he spilled something and shouted out and Watson heard him, right? Is that the story? I don't know if it's a fable or not, but he might be the one that shouted out, oh, Watson, help me. But does that mean that it was his imagination and his imagination only that really brought the possibility of the telephone to us? The answer is no, not at all. Could the telephone have been invented a couple of hundred years before Bell created it? And the answer is no, because our version of physics and energy and conduits and the matters that comprised his invention and the components that he put together, they weren't available. They didn't exist yet. The people before him had not yet created them. The people before them had maybe just started to imagine them. But little by little, step after step, the imaginations of those who are expansive are collecting together to bring greater possibilities, to expand into new arenas, to expand beyond where we had been before. So on this edge, Okay, I don't even know what I did with my marker. Okay, so on this edge, of 2020 that we're living on, the edge of clear vision, what the guides are wanting us to really be mindful of is that our imaginations are the things that are creating tomorrow's telephone. Our imaginations are the things that are creating tomorrow's telephone. Is there going to be one person one day that can take the stuff that you and I imagine together and put it all together and say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, and then invent the next light bulb? Yes, yes, yes. But what's really interesting is even though we are infinite, when it comes to production of goods, when it comes to productions of goods, we're kind of coming toward, I'm not saying this, I swear it, but we're coming toward the end of the industrial era because it's not functioning in a way that brings harmony to people. So creating things and manufacturing things just for the sake of manufacturing things is not supporting global harmony, okay? So maybe the day that we need a better mousetrap, or maybe the day that we need a different kind of light bulb, there's gonna be, as a percentage of the population, there's gonna be fewer and fewer and fewer magnificent, historical, life-changing inventions. Doesn't that make sense, right? So someone can look it up, but how many people lived on the planet when Bell was alive? Like, what was the population of the planet? You know, what was the population of the planet when Edison was alive, right? So if you were to look at the proportion of some of the major inventions, even if you go back to like the printing press, right? If you go back to that invention, but some of the biggest inventions that have changed the course of history, how many inventions per person in the population were there in comparison to what we can possibly invent to change the future while there's 7 billion people on the planet? So the impact of any one person now in proportion to our population, it gets less and less and less, doesn't it? Which is an interesting concept. And the other part is that the energy necessary to enter into creating a massive world-changing object or invention or something, a manufacturable item, the entrance into it has gotten exorbitant. It's no longer just one person in their basement fiddling around with a tool bench and putting their life into playing and twisting and moving and getting new parts. The entrance into being someone that can develop something of that historic importance, it's become almost impossible for one human being to enter into that space anymore, isn't it? First of all, most things that are manufactured for convenience, they can be improved upon, but there's not a lot of brand new stuff out there anymore. Isn't that so? Kind of interesting. There's not a lot of brand new stuff out there. Where our focus is going now is into a world that also can have a pretty large entrance fee, to speak, but we're looking more at things that are technologically oriented. So if you are creating a brand new way of conducting commerce through Amazon or the shopping cart apps and all this stuff, it's no longer, again, it's no longer one guy sitting at his workbench putting things together and tinkering and having one good idea. If you want to now amass the historical change or shift in how people live or work or play, you've got to have major corporations behind you. You've got to have major funding behind you, because the implementation of ideas now takes such a larger amount of energy and time and support and people, and usually it's about programming. So what does that mean for us? It means that the future is not going to be about one person and their imagination. The future is going to be about many people and their imagination. And what can change the course of history even more than an object that we manufacture is tapping into a true understanding of how we create reality. Because that, it is timeless. And you can see throughout all of history that it is timeless. There's evidence of ways that great philosophers have brought through universal wisdom 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. And in all of that time, from the first recorded evidence of wise, eternal words that by far exceeded the lifespan of the person that said those statements or put forth that philosophy, we see it popping up, said in different ways, like century after century after century. We have an answer, 1 billion. In 1804, telephone was invented. Oh, okay, let me see that. Let me read that together because I actually find that really interesting. 1 billion. Oh, he was born in 1804? Gay? I can't see you, so.
Nope.
Okay, so hi. There, I can see you now. So 1 billion people were on the planet. Okay, that's a heck of a difference. 1 billion versus 7 billion. And especially because we understand now that the way that the population grows, the growth is exponential. If you ever looked at one of those time counters, you ever look at one of those apps that counts times, tells you how many babies are being born, or people are buying a car, or people are doing this or doing that, and you can see that the numbers are increasing at an increasing pace. Not that they're just increasing, but they're increasing at an increasing pace. So I was about to draw, so I had the 1 billion on, but from the chat room, then that is astronomical that we're at 7 billion now, right? Can you imagine what that number might look like, the world population in another 100 years? It's mind-blowing. Okay, so anyway, so these points of light throughout history, they brought through information that cannot change. It's irrefutable. It's eternal. It's the nature of reality. It's the nature of consciousness. It's simple ways of understanding how we live, how we die, what we're doing here in physical manifestation. In one form or another, many, many points of light have brought those kinds of information to us and created philosophies or entire forms of government, or they've created, or their channeling has become the basis for religion. They didn't create the religions, but they became the basis for religions. And then someone else will come through and bring through the same thing. Someone else will come through and bring through the same thing, and so on and so forth. Which means that if this keeps happening, then it's inevitable that it's going to keep happening, right? And if it keeps happening and to some extent failing, because obviously the world didn't reharmonize, even with all of the wisdom that any one particular person has ever channeled or brought through, nor has any religion actually reharmonized the planet. So if those things are not successful, that means that we didn't utilize it in a way that can reach, whatever the population was at the time, 1 billion, 500 million, where whomever was walking the planet and bringing these lightning speed, eternally wise statements through, they weren't able to reach that many people through the imagination of how to create the ripples where they can teach more people or reach more people. But now we have kind of ripe circumstances that we've never had before. It's really easy to debate technology and to debate the current state of the planet as far as technology and communications and social media. We can debate it all day. We can find plenty of things about a lot of what's out there and see it as being disharmonious. But the good news is that we are all connected and we can all be instantaneously connected. So now it's a matter of, well, what do we put into that pipe? If we have the ability to reach more people, what are we going to put in there? So what our guides are saying from the answers is that we have been, we meaning they, not me, we have been creating them and lots and lots and lots of other souls, and probably all of your higher selves as well are in on it, right? You're just a piece of your own consciousness right now, but you're up there at the drafting tables with all of them creating this. But what they've done is they've created really ripe circumstances where we are ready and we are able, we are ready and we are able to shift, okay? So I'm obviously hearing this for the first time, so I'm sorting it through. Now, normally we say ready, willing, and able, right? Isn't that the phrase that we always hear? Ready, willing, and able. I don't know who, who brought this through or what the source is or where it came from, ready, willing, and able. But it's kind of cool because it shows all of the energies that are necessary for someone to set a goal and to be able to achieve it. You got to be ready, you got to be willing, and you got to be able. It's actually pretty cool. I never really thought about it in those terms. So what our guides are saying tonight is that they are creating and have created the conditions for us to be ready and to be able. Okay? So let's talk about that. I find this always so exciting when I open up something brand new with you guys from these authors, because I get very, very excited. I know I jump ahead in my mind, and then I have to help to bring it out and get you guys excited too. Okay, so let's talk about that. So they deliberately left out the word willing in that. So what did they do to make us ready? Well, let's see. They tried unifying us through positivity. They helped to create an opportunity for us to, put a man on the moon, right? And in 1969, everybody gathered around the television and watched the first, man walk on the moon. So there's been a lot of globally really exciting adventures where they maybe brought us to being unified and connected. But they didn't necessarily succeed in having it propagate a sense of unity. But there's other ways that they've been trying to get us ready. They got us ready, if anybody remembers, I wish I could remember the year, but in September, it'll be maybe 2 or 3 years where we had this incredible nighttime eclipse of the moon. And I mean, everyone I knew was out there. And I think that it was visible from the majority of the belt of the middle of North America. So the unity of that event as it went around the globe, there were tons and tons of people that knew that it was monumental, rare, and so many people were able to view it simultaneously. So it was incredibly, did I say 3 years? Oh, it was August and not September. Hey, that's not bad. That's not a bad memory, right? Not too bad. Okay, so I did better than I might have. Okay, so August of 2017. I do remember it like it was yesterday, and it was so, so exciting for me to not only witness it, because that was magical, but the most fun was to see people from the ages of, 4 up to 94 that got excited about it. Do we have to get like a special pair of glasses, right, or something? Okay, so getting the glasses, and then I would hear stories of someone came and stumbled upon 10 pairs of glasses and they're going to give one to each family. So there was this like all rallying together over something so magnificently positive, right? So that's an example of getting us ready. It's getting us ready that we have a sense of unity, a sense of coming together. That's getting us ready. Actually, August 21st. Oh, thank you, Jeannie. That was really, really helpful. Huh. Okay, one of you people calculate the numerology of August 21st, 2017, okay? And tell me when we're going to have that numerological energy again, because we'll all have to do something and celebrate that moment. All right, you guys get to that. I'm going to continue here, okay? Okay, so the readiness, we can look through all of history and how they've been attempting to get us ready. So the universe is clever, and if they can see that positive events are not provocative enough to unify us, or that the unification that we experience from a positive event is so fleeting, but when they recognize that a negative event has more power in connecting us, and then for longer periods of time, then of course the universe will shift toward using more provocative experiences and events that are kind of enfolded into something that we would perceive as being difficult or tragic or certainly negative, right? Okay, so we can think of billions of examples of that, and that's all the way through history. And mostly we can see it in terms of war. War, plagues, illnesses, these things are not random. None of them are random. They're all activated through our inability to unify through positivity, the universe and our guides and ourselves and our higher selves, trying to collect us to unify toward the positive. In the absence of that, and through the evaporation of angstful, painful energy from humans that are experiencing harm or tragedy, we are bringing our unifying events through these really difficult packages instead. So we can even see that, how pronounced these events have been in the last 20 years and their opportunity to unify us and to ready us. So let's look at like even 9/11, then we had ensuing wars, then we had, all of these things just in the United States with our political parties and the growing disparity between them. Then we've had, as we've already talked about, these extraordinary weather patterns and extraordinary weather happenings around the world, of magnitude that we globally were sending massive amounts of money and people and aid and materials to different parts of the globe in an attempt to help them pass an earthquake or a tsunami or fires or whatever. But even though the event that was unifying was catastrophic, what it was doing, it was giving us an opportunity to have an aftermath of unity, of coming together through the vibration of love, of bringing love into a region that for whatever reason had been depleted of that vibration. So we can see the process, and a lot of this is somewhat of a review because I've been talking about this for 10 years. So a lot of you understand the historical events and how we responded and what the purpose of those events were just in the context of the last 10 years. And you can apply the same principles to anything that happened long before the last 10 years or the last 20 years. So the guides have been getting us ready, right? They've been getting us ready. And as I talked about before, they also tried to get us ready through increasingly large events such as global warming, where, my God, the word global's in the term. It doesn't get any more global than that, right? So they're readying us and readying us and readying us. So that part we can see how it's working. Now the able part is that in order for us to be able to unify in a singular mind to something that can create a better world than what we're experiencing right now, we have to be able. So a long time ago, I gave a seminar. I just still find it so fascinating about just like the last 100 years of history. So even if we were to go back a little more than 100 years, if we were to look from 1900 to 2020 and look at the changes that have happened, there's no period in history that was ever so magnificent in its ability to create, to change, to invent, we can see it as advance. This last 100 years is unprecedented. Between, let's try to scoop in like post-telegraph. So we had telephone, we had more than 100 years, but we had telephone, then we had radio, then we had cars, then we had planes, then we had jets. We had all of this stuff happening, which is a heck of a lot more advanced than how many years did we use the telegraph, right? How many years were we using the telegraph? Then all of a sudden we've got the radio, the TV, and this within such a short amount of time, and then the man on the moon, right? If you look at how rapidly we have been becoming able, then we can see that it's inevitable that we are heading toward more readiness and more ableness. Okay. So the two components of able is technology and communication. So technology and communication, it's about, so in this we find transportation falls in this category. So the technology and communication advances in the last 100 years have allowed us to become able. So even if there were a massive, massive positive event in 1980, it still could not have any chance whatsoever of unifying the globe because we did not yet have instantaneous communication. We were still living within the context of television. So there was, actually Gabe pointed out to me that it's so intriguing to think about. There was a 24-hour news cycle. So most families would watch 1 hour of news per day. You know, some members of a family would read the morning paper, which was basically the summary of the previous day's news in more depth, and they would read that in the morning. So the bits of news that we got, it was once in the morning and then once in the evening for most people. And for some, if they didn't participate in either of those, it was even less. So the 24-hour news cycle was, we wouldn't even get an update on what had happened the day before, no matter how big or expansive the event was, until the following day's news cycle. So we were not able, because communication and technology didn't support us becoming completely unified on the same page instantaneously. Okay, so now we can fly. Well, we used to be able to fly. We used to be able to fly from one country to another. But even in the absence of travel and the technology that has advanced our ability to get from one place to another so quickly, far more important really has been in the part of able for technology and communications really is the internet. So here we have the internet, which, you know, I think that it was kind of created in the 1980s, but it really didn't come into our awareness probably until the 2000s, maybe the late 90s or the 2000s. So in 20 years, look at how the world has changed. Okay, again, we can debate for better or for worse, but the one singular fact that will remain the same is that we have the ability to be connected globally in any given second, instantaneously. One person could tweet something out right now, and if it caught fire, a billion people could have that tweet within a couple of minutes. It's that magnificent in our ability to connect instantaneously, okay? So we definitely have the ready part now, where we are capable of being unified. We have the ready part, and we have the able part. So what they're working on right now with us is the willing part. That's the hard part, obviously. Okay, so the willing part, I know I refer a lot back to the trip that we had in Grenada in January of 2020, but there was so much information that came forth. So we're going to keep tapping into it, because think of it as it was one big download, and I keep pulling information out, or keep validating the truth of that information that happened during that period, because it is true. So one of the things that we were told in Grenada was that we would be deconstructing the world as we know it, and in order to create a clear canvas to paint a newly constructed reality. Okay, so I know I delivered the message, and I kind of was delivering the message through all of 2019 too, but I know I did it very softly, and I did it and I tried to always do it in a way that was soothing or comforting and, you know, filled with possibility, because it wasn't about being afraid, and it wasn't about, you know, creating a storm shelter or an alien shelter or anything like that. It was about tapping into the power that we have. It was about stepping into spiritual wisdom. Because spiritual wisdom is the thing that will help us to forge our way through any new event or new experience, and to reimagine the world as it unfolds differently, okay? So we are in a massive, massive, massive deconstruction period. Exactly as the guide said it would be, that we're going to have an opportunity to reevaluate everything that it is that we had come to believe was the only way that we could live. So an example would be, I mean, I even was thinking, like, there are some institutions that are just so ingrained or manipulated in our society that I can't see how they could be deconstructed. And, you know, I certainly have thought that, and I think there are still some that are going to have a lot of difficulty getting a little bit looser so that they can break open. But one of them would be police, the way that we are policed, okay? So, you know, you might live in an area that's really harmonious, and that the police force or the police department are, you know, they're acting in accordance with what their role really is to protect and to serve, and that they live as if they are members of the community, and they live as if they understand that that's their role, and they regard it very highly, and they use, you know, as non-offensive methods as they can, with the least intervention possible, in order to affect that result, which is to provide, you know, safety in a community. And, you know, I think some police departments and police forces do a much better job than others, of course. But we also have a history of a lot of places that have done a really horrible job for a really long time, okay? Whether it's due to racism or corruption or the big boy network or that mentality of being untouchable. But it's probably a little bit safe to say that there's a little bit more of that mindset and the mindset of serving the community and being members of the community. And even the number one mission, which, you know, I got to go back and watch like a 1950s show. I'm trying to think of that, like the Andy Griffith Show, right? So they knew that it was to protect and to serve, to protect and to serve, to protect and to serve. Now, right now, it's more that even some of the better communities, they kind of know in the backdrop it's to protect and to serve, but it really is a lot about making money, isn't it? Right? So many of the things that are implemented are about making massive amounts of money, which is why something really simple like a community will drop their speed limit from 35 to 25 and then put speed traps up there, and, you know, they'll make $1 billion in a few weeks, or, you know, traffic cams or all this stuff. Is that really to protect or to serve? No, it's not. It's to make money. So we lost sight of to protect and to serve and to be an active member of the community. So now here we have this incredible unifying event over the last few months. Here we are, we're isolated and we're socially distancing, but we still have in our ability to become ready, willing, and able, we have this unifying event that is now allowing us to deconstruct potentially our concept of policing our communities. And whoever dreamed that would happen? Whoever dreamed that people would say, you know what, we gotta get better at this. It's not to say that all people who are police officers are corrupt or that they don't have their heart on the mission of protect and serve, not by any means. I'm sure there's a lot more that are heartful than not. But if we're gonna roll up our sleeves and take a peek at, you know, corruption and what is our mission and what are we doing? Are we making the community a better place, or are we tearing a community apart? Are we propagating that which is disharmonious, or are we advancing that which is harmonious? That level of deconstructing that we're experiencing right now, to me, is magnificent, because we're stripping away barriers that used to exist, which is primarily the economics and the political aspects of something that's that organized and that self-perpetuating. So in this deconstructing moment, we're going to be seeing more and more of old things being reevaluated. One area that I don't see the advances yet that I would be a little bit more excited to see is definitely when it comes to medicine and hospitalization. I think we're still living in a large way, we're still very archaic about our relationship with our bodies, but I'm okay with that. We can deconstruct, you know, just so much at one time. But as we're moving toward figuring out when we're going to be out and about again fully, and then seeing other, you know, major stories playing out nationally and internationally on the backdrop of this virus, we're deconstructing more. And I'm going to put myself on the line here and say that by 2021, in such a short amount of time, we're going to look back on this year and be able to see the magnificence of how much was deconstructed for potential good, for being able to reconstruct it from a better place, from a better position. Okay? So getting back to the willing, so the willingness is that here's where the deconstructing plays out in the lives of individuals. So in the process of deconstructing and pulling apart things that we would just take for granted and expect to self-perpetuate, we are watching a lot of people fall, right? We're seeing a lot of people become anxious, fear-based, reticent, they're hiding, they're becoming, certainly a lot of people are becoming more fear-based. what that's doing is the more people who are living in a spiritual state of disharmony and they're disconnected from the infinite wisdom of the soul, what they're doing is they're becoming potentially more willing, because we can only take so much pain. We can only take so much disconnect. The human spirit, as we disconnect from our soul, we're incredibly resilient and incredibly, by and large, very, very imaginative. And that imagination and that resilience will rise. For some people, they won't rise. Some people will hide, and some people will die, and some people will fall away, and some people will make their lives a lot smaller and ride out the rest of their life in a smaller way. But that's inevitable. It happens every time there's a shakeup. But there's going to be more people that say, the way that I feel today is not acceptable. So therefore, I'm going to open myself up to looking at new ways of perceiving reality. So the willingness is that, as I said, how the universe and these guides, and apparently they have a lot of hand in some of these things, where they tried to help us with the willingness and the readiness through positive events, and it doesn't work. So as they move toward still throwing some really positive and awesome stuff out there, but the more provocative, as we've said, is the negative events. Now we have a worldwide, I think everybody could classify it as the event itself as negative, regardless of whether you've had a negative reaction to it or not. I think we could qualify it as being negative. So now we have this global event that can potentially make more and more and more people willing. So that's what it is that that's what they are working on, is the ready, the willing, and the able, and especially amping up the willing part right now. I'm going to read the chat room because it looks pretty interesting to me. Okay, do you believe that the friends we have lost or let go of because they do not believe in the benefits of this deconstruction and are prompted to forcefully support the disharmonious will be able to cross over with us? It's a really good question. So it's also a good segue from where we're going and what they're saying. And I'll show it in the model that I use a lot. Okay, so this model works in every circumstance, and I know I talk about it a lot. So in the journey of being a human being, part of what we're working to do all the time is to move from the ego, which is making us 100% human, moved from that to igniting the soul, which when you're 100% soul, you don't even have a body. You know, I might be pretty soulful, but I am not 100% soul by any means. I don't know where I am on the spectrum, and I don't care because it doesn't matter. The only thing that I know is that I'm probably higher than average, okay? So let's say I'm higher than average in my ability to bring soulfulness to the planet versus ego to the planet. And so if we look at vibrations, then it's so funny because I did have a conversation with someone about this today. I don't know why, I don't think I did it, but the guys always name things in terms of fruits and vegetables. So if you're like vibrating at the size of a pea versus, you know, vibrating at the size of a watermelon, what happens is your reach is so much farther if you're vibrating at the level of a watermelon. And your reach is not as great when you're vibrating at the size of a pea. So in this deconstructing period, there are going to be a lot of people who will seem to sink, okay? But when a person is sinking, they usually had lower levels of awareness to begin with. So they might have gotten information that's in their head philosophically about having a happier life, but they weren't able to implement it. So all that stuff's sitting around there in their head, and then the moment they get triggered by something that's untenable, they kind of like drop. So they kind of, one of their masks and layers just gets hardier, and they become more despondent and less connected to their soul. So that stuff in their head that they've been exposed to, you can't be living and breathing on the planet and not have been exposed to some information of value about enlightenment. You don't have to even call it enlightenment, but just sit in your middle school classroom for a month and you can see all those motivational posters around the room, and they're all based on universal truth, right? So if you have been exposed, there's no doubt you've been exposed, but if it's all in your head and it hasn't been brought in, then all you need is a little something to shake it up all, it falls out of the head, and then you just pull those masks and layers on tighter. So you're kind of moving from a lower vibration to a lower vibration. But the good news is, this is the one thing that the guides have been telling me for 5 years, 8 years, the change for 2020 and beyond is that the amount of energy above the line will eclipse, it'll equal and then eclipse the amount of energy below the line. Okay, so it's easier to pull out some numbers. Suppose there were 100 people on the planet. If there are 85 people out of 100 that are living below the line, and you add all of those little bits of energy together, and it's 85, and then you got 15 that are like kind of, they're living above the line, all of those are still going to energetically eclipse the 15 that are living higher. Does everyone see that? Like, look at it in terms of mass, okay? Now, the game changer is that those living below the line, it's going to become equal because people are rising. Yes, people are falling, but to go from a cherry tomato to a pea is not going to have the same energetic impact on the planet as moving from an orange to a grapefruit, right? So how many peas, if I were to just take the difference of the orange to the grapefruit, how many peas can I fit in that change, right? Does everyone see that? That's a lot. And I'm only drawing this linearly in 2D. This is actually a sphere. So you look at this from a sphere perspective, that's a hell of a lot. So one person's expansion eclipses a lot of people's default going down, right? And so that's the really good news, is in the process of helping us to become ready, willing, and able. We don't need numbers of people to rise. We just need the people that are rising to eclipse the vibrational energy of those who are below the line. That's all we need. It's not a numbers game. It's an energy. It's an energy equation. Everything in physical manifestation is created by energy. This is an energy equation. That's all it is. It's an equation about energy. That's all it is. Okay? It's just energy. So, so in answer to her question, they don't have to come with us. They just don't. They can stay where they are. They can lock themselves up. They can be miserable. And I know it's sad, and I'm not trying to be lacking in compassion, because a lot of people will show disharmonies in a way that it's heartbreaking. However, what will happen is, as the vibration is increasing above the line, then those will become the decision makers. Those will be the people who affect how we live and the choices about how we live. Right now, they're silenced because the ego of those below the line is amassing the soulfulness of the vibrational energy of those who are living closer to the soul, right? So what we see as possible doesn't have as much effect in changing the world yet, right? The ego is still the one ruling the world. But as this change happens, it's going to shift toward being the soulful energy, because the vibrational energy on this side is going to be greater than the vibrational energy on that side. And for all of recorded human history, the vibration on this side was greater than the vibration on this side. All of recorded human history, all of it. We're about to change that. So let's get back to the example of the police department. So let's just say, I'm not putting down officers, I'm not putting down police departments, I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is, what is their motivation? And it can be different for every single police department in the country and in the world. What is their motivation? Are they motivated by ego, or are they motivated by soul? Okay, what is their motivation? So now in this deconstructing period, if a person has authority and they're noting that their particular police force was coming from the place of creating disharmony and perpetuating circumstances that were not moving the community forward in any way, but were setting them back and making it untenable for people to live in a state of feeling protected and safe and having their well-being, every single person having their well-being supported. And then a person of authority, if they're coming from a more soulful place, which you have to if you're deconstructing a police department, right? If they're dismantling it, then already someone who has a position of authority and that can affect potentially millions of people, already the shift is happening, right? Rather than some person from the old school network that rose through the ranks, making the decision and passing it on through his legacy to someone else that's going to exact the same exact of, well, that's the way it's always been done. So this is a moment where we get to see that it's possible. It's really, really, really possible, right? It's really possible. You know, even in politics, the same thing is possible. The more the guides are helping us, and again, this is your higher selves too, the more we're becoming ready, willing, and able, the more politicians who are soulful are going to be elected. The more people who are soulful and are elected, the fewer issues we're going to have with inertia through bipartisanship, where nothing positive can be moved forward in that deadlock, because there'll be more higher vibrational energy. Higher vibrational energy as a way of communicating things that resonate with others, right? That's what leadership is. It's that what you're saying makes sense. It's coming from a place of love. It has a mission that I believe in. Even if I feel like there's something I'm giving up, I feel connected to the bigger picture, and I feel excited to be a part of that bigger picture. So in politics, what might a politician think they're giving up? They might be thinking they're giving up income or votes if they don't get this amount of money for this, or they may think they're giving up power. But eventually, as more leaders are entering into the space and they're coming from soul, they're coming from soulful wisdom, then the narrative in those environments is going to change, and they're going to be willing to listen, because the egoic part will be getting less and less and less. The replacement will be that there's fewer of these. So they'll find, and soulful people have a way of helping people to understand that even if you think this is not in your best interest, it is in your best interest. And that's something that's beautiful about a true leader, is that they can help somebody to understand that this is in your best interest. Oh, that's a good question. Was Ayn Rand the original author of The Soul and Ego line with peas to grapefruit energy? I don't think it appears in any of my books at all. And I don't remember the first time I talked about it at a seminar. It just feels like it's been a part of what I've done forever and ever and ever. All right, so her answer is she is a co-creator of the concept. She's definitely a co-creator of the concept. There's another question I missed. Do the peas know they are willing? No, they don't. But from that state of discomfort, they're motivated to perhaps be open or amenable to something that's different than what they had been choosing in the past, okay? But no, being asleep also means that they can react to motivations that might be positive, but they're usually not aware of what the motivation was or why the reaction is shifting to it, okay? You have to kind of be awake to start to understand the why of why you make the choices that you make. See if I missed anything else. Yes, yes, those living in love have already been willing. There's no doubt about that. I think everybody here can recognize and understand that we're all willing. We're not the target audience, right? What guys work on with us, which is one of the reasons I think we love coming together, and I know that they'll be working with us in an increasing way in the future. They're working with us to step into the power that we have in being more soulful than would be typical out there, and to understand in an increasing way what we can do with that soulfulness, not to become despondent, not to slip into it's easy to see, getting back to their word provocative, it's easy to see the provocation of all of these events, how you can say, oh, I don't feel as optimistic as I used to. Well, that's a luxury we don't have. We can't join them. We really gotta keep moving on. We gotta keep moving on because we know fundamentally that the things that we talk about and the things that we connect on are truth. We can't lose sight of that, right? It would be like the equivalent of a ship in a storm, and all of a sudden they finally see a lighthouse, and it literally is a beacon for them, and they can see that if they honor where that lighthouse is and they move away, they're not going to get pushed up onto the rocks and crash and have a shipwreck and have everybody die. But if they run to the other side of the boat and they stop looking at the lighthouse and they be like, oh, I don't know what we're going to do, I think we're going to die, then that's a silly luxury to do that, right? Just because you were self-pitying, you're not going to run to the other side of the boat and pretend you don't see the light. You can't. It's a waste. It's a waste of life. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of your journey on that ship. So we don't really have that option. Those who are living above the line, we don't have the option to pretend that we don't see the light. It's kind of a funny metaphor. It really is. But we don't have that option. We can try to pull the people on the back of the boat toward the front and say, it's right there. Come on, just open your eyes. There it is. There it is. There it is. And that's our role. You just keep saying, there it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. I have mentioned this over the years. In 13 years of me doing what I'm doing, and I can't even count the numbers of people that I've had in audiences over the years, but literally tens of thousands of people I've had in audiences in 13 years. And in 13 years, I probably have been challenged while I'm up on that stage in an uncomfortable way, possibly 3 times. 3 times out of tens of thousands of people. You can't find a speaker that has had that experience. You just can't. So the anomaly of it is, why do people not challenge me, right? The reason they don't challenge me, And the reason I don't create angst in them or anger or ego, the reason I don't bring forth their ego is because the things I say resonate. So they feel comforted and soothed by what I bring forth. So that I'm not saying that about me at all. I'm showing you the evidence that soulful beings are natural leaders and naturally soothe their audience, no matter what the audience is. It could be people on a train, it could be people on a plane, it could be people in a store, it could be people in your house. We naturally soothe because you're resonating with truth, and that truth is it's palpable. That vibration of love is touchable. People feel it. I didn't invite in, people to challenge me so that I would have to bring the ego forth to defend. And it never even occurred to me to want to debate anybody about the things that I brought through, because there's a peace in what I know, and I don't have to have somebody agree, and I don't have to have them sign up. All I do is present information, and if it's agreeable to someone, they take it in. But that's an example of soulfulness rather than ego. So since I'm not coming from a place of ego, I don't invite people to challenge me in public in a way that creates discomfort for everybody there, because I'm not asking them to change. I'm just giving them information, and that information resonates. And that's what I think we're all doing here, and that's what we're all doing through, that's what we're all doing with an in-depth look into the answers. That's exactly what it is that we're doing, okay? Oh, here's an interesting thing. Not an author in the book, but I guess they want to leave you with a little bit of fireworks tonight. Oh, so I've answered your question, right? So the answer is that more soulful people will be in positions of leadership. Okay. So as we deconstruct and less of what was non-soulful living becomes more disagreed upon, people are no longer willing to accept it as they're becoming more willing in the ready, willing, and able part, then more people of leadership roles will be implementing soulful choices. And as soon as you see really big things deconstruct, it actually gives great opportunities for soulful people to put soulful choices into the waters of humanity, because there's not going to be as much kicking and screaming. Because if you go from we're 100% doing this all the time, and now we're doing 0 of this all the time, when someone comes in and puts in a whole new method and it's soulful, and now what are they going to do? They're fight. We have 0. What are you fighting for? You need 100? You don't even remember 100 anymore, right? So if someone comes in and they put in 50 of what people remember, but that 50 is right between disharmonious and how extremely disharmonious people were living, then they've advanced everything. Now is the perfect time to do it, because the slates are being cleared. The canvases are being wiped out. There's a question here. Why are our soulful peers blinded by unsoulful leaders? I'm baffled by that a lot too. I think what happens is people get our self-identification is, I feel like I'm overusing the word, but I'm not the one choosing, but our self-identification is provocative. It's something that helps us to feel as though we matter. All of those little things that we have on our checklist of who we are. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And anything that we perceive as being positive in particular, we feel very threatened if someone tells us that it's not true. So what happens is we want to try to hold on to our self-identification. So if we believe that we got value from a particular leader or a speaker, and somebody else tells us that we didn't, or there's contrasting information, we will actually just continue to put all of our faith there, because it's helping us to believe that we are worthy, that we are intelligent, that we are spiritual, that we are enlightened. Most spiritual teachers, per se, or leaders, they don't teach independent thinking, do they? They really don't. I don't see a lot of that going on. So it's not about, spirituality is not about adopting my perspective about something and calling it your own. What spiritual wisdom is, it's about being able to have the tool of discernment to be able to take any information that comes your way and use your intuitive understanding to meet that event or that experience or that person halfway there, and not to either wholly reject or wholly accept, but to use that system of intuition to evaluate for yourself whether or not something is resonating. And oftentimes there are people who are leaders out there that they give a lot of good, they deliver a ton of useful, eternally wise information, but they might have a slant or two based on their own biases from their personal history that slant or contort the value of all of their content. So even discernment means you want to be able to use intuition for all subject matters and not just say, because I accept this from that one and therefore I accept the whole of that body as a conduit, that I have to accept every single thing that comes in through that conduit now. Every time you meet a piece of information, regardless of the speaker, you got to use that discernment, that intuition. I of course was enamored with the power of intuition because of my path in getting to where I was. One of the things I didn't realize until very recently is that, I am guided, that I realized, but when I would put seminars out there and I would do things, it would come from me and I would get a spark of a good idea, but those ideas were co-created. And throughout all of the 13 years, regardless of topics that have come and go or topics that have grown, the one topic that has always remained was intuition development. From day one to today, I always help people with intuition development. And the reason is, intuition development is the pathway to independent thinking. It is the pathway to eternal connection. It is the pathway to discernment. It is the pathway to love. So without intuition, it's almost impossible to really advance yourself or society or a family or a friend. So that's what I'm talking about, and that's the answer to your question. All right, so what I was going to say, now it's 8:30, so I'll bring it in kind of quickly, but we have a guest in quickly who did not have any authorship in this whatsoever. He came into me by a huge surprise many, many years ago. Oh my God, probably 8 to 10 years ago, maybe even more than that. I don't remember. He came in once, and it was really cool. And I think I even jotted down what he said at the time. And I just found the experience to be really exhilarating. And I haven't communicated with him since. And the person who's in right now, the soul who's in right now, and again, not at all in my knowingness, an author or a contributor to this book in any way. Maybe he's the author of The New Answers that's coming out in 2020, meaning what we're doing. Well, who knows, maybe it'll be a book, I don't know. But it happens to be John F. Kennedy Jr., which is intriguing. So here's what he was bringing forth. I don't know what I was talking about when he came in, but he was showing me the analogy of, this is not meant to be, fear-based at all. It's just, this is just, he's showing me the metaphor. It's not meant to be uncomfortable. It's meant to be liberating. So here he is. I'm going to just tell you whatever he gives me. So he's trapped on this planet by the legacy of his father. And he's trapped on this planet even more so by the legacy of his father's death. And so he doesn't have the autonomy to create his own identity, nor can he be evaluated for himself because of basically being like the first American crowned prince, right? So he doesn't have the opportunity to be himself. He doesn't have the opportunity to fail. He doesn't have the opportunity to choose a career path without billions of pieces of input and judgment about the wisdom of his choices. People watching his grades, people watching how he tests, people watching what he eats, people watching who he dates. So he really was raised in a circumstance that didn't allow him to become the soul that he might have become. And so he did certain things to carve out some autonomy and to carve out being able to live within his own self-identification, not the identification that the world had placed on him. One of the ways to do that metaphorically was to, what's the easiest way to self-identify? If things here are, I think my markers, I just overused them, so let me just take out a fresher one and let those sit for a minute. So if things here on the earth are grave, right, and I would say that things for him were grave, you know, people and their opinions and their invasiveness and their intrusiveness and their judgment, that was a grave set of circumstances to be raised in. So what's the best thing to do if you don't like gravity, right? You defy it, you leave. So metaphorically, what he did was he learned how to fly. He became a pilot, right? So he got his pilot's license. And the allure of getting away from effing humanity was so great that he didn't even consider his own safety when he flew in conditions where it was really important that he had his instrumentation license, right? So in those circumstances, if you don't have the line of sight of gravity, then it's difficult to navigate in the fog and the rain, especially for an inexperienced pilot. So obviously the instrumentation license is critical for being able to fly in any of those conditions. So what he's giving me as a metaphor of his life is that as he tried to defy gravity, defy the graveness of the experiences that he was raised into, what he did was he was so enamored by the freedom and the liberty that he felt in the escape from humanity that he no longer stayed connected to his own sense of self-preservation, right? So in that disconnect, that moment of freedom was so exhilarating that he lost his focus on, it's really important if I'm going to fly in these conditions that I have my instrumentation license and I have enough experience. Otherwise, I am going to stay grounded, even if I have to hang out with humans where they live and where they play for a couple more days until I can actually take off again and go where I want to go. So this is his evaluation of the metaphor of his life. And I'll sum it up with something that happened early in my journey. In 2005, I guess it was 2005. Yeah, I think it was. So in 2005, when I started to communicate with guides, is when someone introduced me to Jane Roberts, and I had never heard of her, and I never heard of the Seth material. But I read one book because I needed a frame of reference for what I was doing, and I had zero physical frame of reference for what I was doing. So I read one book, but what I became aware of was that she gave a lot to a lot of people, and she used her developed skill set as often as humanly possible. She amassed a great body of work. She was prolific in her ability to put out books, to hold classes, to teach intuition development, to channel for other people, and so on. So she felt that because it was uncommon to be able to do what she did, she felt that she had a responsibility to humanity to get as much information of value out there on the planet as possible. So with her commitment to her work, and it was a beautiful and wonderful commitment, she forewent the equation of the mind and the body and the spirit. So she was bringing through massive amounts of soul into her journey for everybody, and she was massively using her brilliant mind in order to allow that flow from spirit through her mind to come forth. But what she did was she neglected the body. So the body was just sort of like a convenience that she carried around to be able to be the voice for Seth, and she neglected it. So she died young. I don't remember if she was 58 or 57, but what I get in her legacy was that somehow the guides were able to get me that information very quickly in 2005, because I could see how alluring that pathway could be. I could see myself becoming obsessed. I could see myself becoming a workaholic and not honoring my own wholeness, okay? So what this correlates with is that, John F. Kennedy Jr., he didn't have a frame of reference like I got early on. I got an early reference of Jane Roberts, so I knew what not to do, and I took it to heart. So I made sure that I remain whole so that I can be a conduit for more information for more people. But John F. Kennedy, he didn't have that frame of reference. He didn't have someone that became the first American prince and showed how he navigated it. He didn't have an adult who could have soul-to-soul conversations and opportunities to show him how to navigate or to protect him or to help him create an adult world. So without that frame of reference, he forewent the body just the same way that Jane Roberts did. And we don't feel negatively about that when it happens. When we're on the other side, we have no connection whatsoever to the numbers of years we lived, and there are no badges for longevity. But what we do is we all double down on our knowingness when we're guiding others who we have left behind, because the body of experience and wisdom that we amassed in the human experience, plus what we got simply by dying and all that knowledge that came flooding back to us, we have a more concentrated concept of how we can help to bring humanity to a stage of able, willing, and ready. Right? And whoever wrote wow, thank you. I appreciate it. That was kind of fun. I liked hearing his quick summary of the story of his life. And it's interesting because it just shows the profundity of how we experience our soulfulness in the human journey, right? It's just really interesting how everything is created by energy. Everything is created by energy. We know that. Everything is created by energy. Okay, so I didn't give you any more homework assignments. So what we'll do is I'll send out the notes again of our provocative, the 3 questions to ask yourself, and then part A and B of question 3. Remember, it was for me and it was for others. So there was 2 parts to the question. Were there 4 questions? Might have been 4. So I'll send this out again. So just continue to use that insight in whatever is stimulating you to be compelled. So every time you hear news or something happens, or you experience drama, or you experience something even startling or stunning or interesting or intriguing, whenever you're creating an emotion that creates some kind of reaction, go to those questions again and share them, because I would like I'd like people to put some of them in writing so I can share them with everybody. I always share them anonymously. One of the best ways to make our discoveries is by sharing. We can see so much more through the eyes of other soulful people than we can necessarily see for ourselves. They really help us to get a more well-rounded perspective. Okay, so I'll send that out again, and then please share the experiences that you have and how the equation helped you to change your approach or manage your approach. Okay, let me move this so that I can peek at everybody again. All right, it was wonderful, 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 wonderful to see you all. We've got a lot of fun stuff ahead of us, and we can all be bigger and stronger and more powerful together than any one of us can ever be alone. Okay? Good night, everybody.